Hello everybody, my name is Olympia Barca and today we will talk about the human nervous system. We will cover its anatomy and functions, some of its main components, and we will also discuss how yoga practice can affect our nervous system. And when I talk about yoga practice, I do not mean just asana, but also pranayama, or breathing techniques in English, and meditation. To begin with, I would like to go through the different topics that we will cover today. These are a general anatomy overview of the nervous system, the different neuron cells and their functions, a glimpse of the brain and its anatomy, the spinal cord and the autonomic nervous system and its subdivisions. We will also see what are some of the most common disorders and how yoga can bring benefits to our nervous system and consequently to our overall well-being. We will finish with a yoga practice including asana, pranayama, and meditation that will help you calm and relax your sympathetic nervous system. Before we dive in, I would like to quote Galen, or Galinos in Greek, one of the most accomplished medical researchers of ancient history, who said, "Look to the nervous system as the key to maximum health." Let's take a moment to reflect on this quote from the 2nd century AD and keep it in mind throughout our session today. If you're ready, let's begin. So, what is the nervous system? The nervous system is the most complex and highly organized body system. It's a collection of nerves and specialized cells called neurons that control and coordinate all of the organs and structures of the human body by transmitting signals between the different parts of the body. It receives information from the sensory organs via nerves, transmits the information through the spinal cord, and then processes this information in the brain. It directs our body's reaction and controls most of our internal functions, everything from muscle movement to hormone secretion to blood vessel dilation. Simply put, the nervous system allows our bodies to perceive sensations, to think, and to perform all of our movements, both voluntary and involuntary. In order to do this, it sends electrical and chemical lightning-quick signals between cells. It is essentially the body's electrical wiring. The nervous system has two components, or divisions if you'd like, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is marked with purple color and consists of the brain and spinal cord. It is the body's master control unit. The peripheral nervous system is marked with yellow color on the diagram and consists of sensory neurons, ganglia, which are clusters of neurons, and nerves that are connected to one another and to the central nervous system. It is the body's link to the outside world. Before we delve deeper into the components and functions of its division, let's take a look at the neuron first, the primary functional unit of the nervous system. Neurons, also called nerve cells, are specialized conductor cells that can be found in all nervous system from the brain to the spinal cord to the furthest nerve branch. They are the cells responsible for receiving sensory information from the external environment, for sending motor, which means movement, commands to our muscles, and for conducting the electrical signals that pass information throughout the body. There are 86 billion neurons in the human body, which are divided in 3 different types. And these types are sensory neurons. Sensory neurons respond to stimuli from the environment, which can be physical or chemical, and they send signals to the spinal cord or brain. The physical or chemical input that activates the sensory neurons corresponds to all senses, so a physical input can be sound, touch, heat, or light, while a chemical input can be taste or smell. Motor neurons are part of the central nervous system, so they can be found in the brain and spinal cord, and they are connected to muscles, glands, and organs throughout the body. They receive signals from the brain and spinal cord, and they control everything from muscle contractions to glandular output. The interneurons are the connective neurons. They connect motor and sensory neurons within the same region of the brain or spinal cord. Not only they transfer signal between sensory and motor neurons, they can also communicate with each other, and they form circuits of various complexity. Let's move to neuron anatomy. A useful way to describe a neuron's anatomy is to think of it as a tree. As a tree has three main parts, roots, trunk, and branches, so does the neuron. They are called axon, which is the equivalent of a tree's roots, a cell body also known as soma, which is a tree trunk, and the dendrites, which are the tree's branches. The dendrites are part of the neuron that receives output from other cells. Dendrites branch as they move towards their tips, just like tree branches do, and they even have leaf-like structures on them called spines. The soma is where the nucleus lies, which contains the neuron's DNA, and where proteins are made to be transported throughout the axon and dendrites. And the axon is the output structure of the neuron. When a neuron wants to communicate with another neuron, it sends an electrical message called an action potential throughout the entire axon. Nerves are made of action bundles. So, how does a neuron work? Dendrites have receptors that are designed to pick up signals from other neurons. These signals come in the form of chemicals that are called neurotransmitters. Some neurotransmitters you probably have already heard of are serotonin, dopamine, epinephrine, and oxytocin. Once picked up, these signals cause electrical changes in a neuron, and then the soma takes all this information gathered from the dendrites and interprets it. If the signal coming from the dendrites is strong enough, then an outgoing signal is sent to the axon, and at this point, we call the signal an action potential. The action potential travels through the axon towards the axon terminals, which are also known as synaptic buttons. When this signal reaches them, it can cause the release of neurotransmitter, which will then be picked up by the dendrites of the next neuron, and then the process repeats to the next and the next and the next neuron. This conductive capability sends information up and down nerve pathways and through the central nervous system at incredible speed, only fractions of a millisecond. To get an idea about the speed, let me mention that signals travel along an alpha motor neuron in the spinal cord at approximately 268 miles per hour, or 431 kilometers per hour. It's really fast. Now that we have a basic understanding of the neurons and how they work to transmit information throughout our nervous system, let's move on to getting a better look to our central nervous system, starting with the brain. The brain controls most of the activities of the body and is contained in and protected by the skull bones of the head. It weighs approximately 1.4 kilo, and although it represents 3% of the total body weight, it uses 20% of the body's energy. It has nerve cells called neurons, as we covered already, and supporting cells called glia or neuroglia. Neuroglia have four main functions: surround neurons and hold them in place, supply nutrient and oxygen to neurons, insulate one neuron from another, and destroy pathogens and remove dead neurons. They also play a role in neurotransmission and synaptic connections in physiological processes like breathing. There are two types of matter in the brain: gray matter and white. Gray matter receives and stores impulses and consists of cell bodies of neurons, neuroglia, synapses, and capillaries, which are the smallest blood vessel of the body. White matter in the brain carries impulses to and from gray matter and consists of the nerve fibers, which, as we mentioned before, are action bundles. The human brain can be divided into four major parts. The cerebrum, which is the part with the folds and crevices that most of us associate with the mental image when we hear the word brain, and consists of two cerebral hemispheres, each of them divided into four different lobes. The cerebrum in its entirety is responsible for activities like touch, vision, hearing, speech, reasoning, emotion, learning, and fine control movements. Within its lobe, there are areas that are associated with specific functions, such as sensory, motor, and association regions. Then there is the cerebellum, which is also known as the hindbrain. It's located in the back region of the brain and below the back of the cerebrum, and its exterior consists of thin, parallel folds. It contributes to the coordination and precision of muscle movements and to maintain posture and balance. It gives us motor memory, so for example, when we learn to ride a bike and then we remember how to ride it, that's going to be thanks to the cerebellum. It may also be involved in emotional control, such as regulating fear and pleasure responses. Then there is a diencephalon, which is in the interior of the brain, and we can only see it entirely if the brain is cut open. In intact brains, only the floor of the diencephalon can be seen directly above the brainstem. Its different divisions are responsible for the regulation of consciousness, sleep, and alertness, and control processes like hunger, fatigue, thirst, and parenting behaviors, among others. And then there is the brainstem at the lowest part of the brain that connects directly to the spinal cord, but it's noticeably thicker than the spinal cord below it. It regulates cardiac and respiratory function by helping to control breathing rate, heart rate, and body temperature, while it is also responsible for the regulation of the central nervous system, digestion, and the body sleep cycle. Furthermore, it sorts the information coming in and out of the brain. Moving on, let's take a look at the different brain lobes. As mentioned before, each hemisphere of the cerebrum is divided into 4 different lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. Although we now know that most brain functions rely on many different regions across the entire brain working in conjunction, it is still true that each lobe carries out the bulk of certain functions. The frontal lobe is generally where higher executive functions, including rational thought, emotional regulation, planning, decision-making, reasoning, and problem-solving occur. The frontal lobe also contains the primary motor cortex, the major region responsible for voluntary movement. The parietal lobe is behind the frontal lobe and responsible for processing sensory information including touch, temperature, pressure, and pain. The temporal lobe also contains regions dedicated to processing sensory information, particularly important for hearing, recognizing language, learning, and forming memories. It contains the primary auditory cortex, which receives auditory information from the ears and secondary areas and processes the information so we can understand what we're hearing. For example, is it words, laughing, a baby crying? Also, certain areas in the temporal lobe make sense of complex visual information, including faces and scenes. Finally, the medial temporal lobe, medial means closer to the middle of the brain, contains the hippocampus, which is a region of the brain very important for memory, learning, and emotions. Last but not least, we have the occipital lobe, which is the major visual processing center of the brain. This is where the primary visual cortex, also known as V1, is located, and it receives visual information from the eyes. This information relates to several secondary visual processing areas which interpret depth, distance, location, and the identity of the seen objects. Let's see 5 common myths about the human brain. Myth number 1. Humans can only use about 10% of our brain, or you might have heard sometimes 20. Thanks to modern brain scanning technology, we know that we use our whole brain all of the time, though we do not necessarily use it all at once. For example, when we are walking, the parts of the brain associated with movement are more active than other areas. Myth number 2. People are right or left-brained. Humans use both hemispheres of the brain for all cognitive functions. The left brain or right brain notion originated from the realization that many people process language more in the left hemisphere and emotional expression more in the right. Though there are some minor differences between the two hemispheres, studies on thousands of individuals have found no evidence of left or right hemisphere dominance. We use both sides equally. Myth number 3. We have 5 senses. Most of us at some point in our lives believe that there are 5 senses: sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch, which is not true. In fact, we have a lot more, like nociception, which is the sense of pain, or proprioception, also called kinesthesia, which is the sense of how our bodies are positioned. We also have a sense of acceleration, temperature, balance, and passing of time. Not to mention that some people don't even perceive senses the same way. For example, people with synesthesia can see sound or colors or associate certain sights with smells. Myth number 4. It's all downhill after 40, or 50 or 60 or 70. Some cognitive skills do decline as we get older. For example, children are better at learning new languages than adults. Young adults are faster than older adults in spotting differences between two objects or in memorizing a list of random words. However, plenty of mental skills improve with age. For example, older people know more words, understand subtle linguistic distinctions, and score higher on tests of social wisdom, such as how to settle a conflict. Also, over time, people get better and better at regulating their own emotions and finding meaning in their lives. And myth number 5. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Okay, I'm going to state a fact here. In the past, eminent neuroscientists claimed that the head size or brain stem structure were responsible, wait for it, women's inability to think creatively, to vote logically, or to practice medicine. I'm just giving you a minute here to process it. Today's theories are a little bit more sophisticated, so men are supposed to have more specialized brain hemispheres, women are supposed to have more elaborate emotion circuits, and although there are some minor differences between male and female brains, these are uncorrelated with any particular ability. Women are broadly thought to outperform men on tests of empathy, but when test subjects are told that men are particularly good at the test, then men perform just as well or even better than women. The opposite happens during tests of reasoning, where men are thought to outperform women. There are certain sex differences that are enormously important to us when we are looking for a mate. But when it comes to what our brains do most of the time, like perceiving our environment or directing attention, learning new skills, communicating with others, or judging other people's emotions, men and women have almost entirely overlapping abilities. And these were 5 common myths about the brain. I hope you learned something interesting. So let's move on to the second part of the central nervous system, which is the spinal cord. The spinal cord is an elongated cylinder of neuron cell bodies, bundles of axons and other cells protected by connective tissue and bone. It connects to the brain at the lower brainstem and runs down the spine enclosed within a hollow tunnel of the vertebra called vertebral column. It is around 45 centimeters long in men and around 43 in women, and its diameter spans from 13 millimeters in the cervical and lumbar regions to 6.4 millimeters in the thoracic area. The spinal cord is part of the central nervous system and serves like a kind of superhighway. Sensory information and motor commands travel up and down in an incredible speed, heading to and from the brain. These signals speed in and out the spinal cord via spinal nerves, which branch out to supply the limbs, torso, and pelvis. Some incoming signals demand a simple, immediate response, And in some of these cases, the spinal cord can shoot out a reflex command without bothering the brain. The spinal cord primal function is a transmission of nerve signals from the motor cortex to the body and from the sensory neurons to the sensory cortex, while it also is the center for coordinating many reflexes. Furthermore, it is the location of groups of spinal interneurons that make up the neural circuits known as central pattern generators. These circuits are responsible for controlling motor instructions for rhythmic movements such as walking. Let's see some facts about the spinal cord. It stops growing once we reach the age of 5. The spinal cord undergoes a lot of growth in the first 4 to 5 years, up to 16 to 20 inches long, but then stops. Our body keeps growing around the spinal column, which stays exactly as long as it was when we reach the age of 5. Our spinal cord has a memory for pain. Let's say you hurt your toe really hard, or even break it. When you experience an instance of great pain, the neurons in your spinal cord will carry signals more easily to the nerves in your injured area. In this example, to your toe. And they do it for several days, making it feel more sensitive. This is the result of a specific molecule thought to be the precursor to memory. Damage to the spinal cord can cause paralysis. When the spinal cord is severed at any point due to injury, a number of resulting forms of paralysis can occur. Complete paralysis, when almost all sensory feeling and ability to control movement are lost below the spinal cord injury, or incomplete, when you still have some motor or sensory function below the injury. There are other terms used that are quadriplegia, which means that the arms, hands, trunk, legs, and pelvic organs are all affected by the spinal cord injury. And there is also paraplegia, which means that the paralysis extends to all part of the trunk, legs, and pelvic organs. The most common reason for paralysis is spinal cord injuries due to vehicle accidents, falls, and sports accidents, but it may also occur due to stroke or neuromuscular diseases like multiple sclerosis. About 58% of spinal cord injured individuals are considered paraplegic and about 42% quadriplegic. The last fact is, we need our spinal cord in order to sweat. In spinal cord injuries resulting in quadriplegia, the spinal cord no longer can transmit the signals from your brain to your sweat glands. Those people with this kind of injury must be cooled down manually with cool water or air conditioning. Now that we covered the central nervous system, let's move on to the peripheral nervous system and its divisions. The peripheral nervous system consists of the nerves and ganglia outside the brain and spinal cord, and it's made up of 2 divisions. The somatic nervous system, which is associated with voluntary movement and contains nerves that carry sensory information signals from the body towards the central nervous system, and nerves that carry motor signals from the central nervous system to the skeletal muscles. And then there is the autonomic nervous system, which is sometimes called the involuntary nervous system, and it is involved in regulating the internal environment of the body. It carries signals from internal organs to the central nervous system and vice versa. In this way, it is involved in processes which are generally outside of conscious control, such as digestion or heartbeat. The autonomic nervous system is further subdivided into 2 different functional states. So we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system plays a big role in stimulating and mobilizing energy resources, while the parasympathetic nervous system acts to conserve it. So for example, when being in a stressful situation, our sympathetic nervous system will cause an increased heart rate, blood pressure, and stimulation of sweat glands. On the other hand, if we are in a safe and relaxed environment, eating a meal at home, for example, our parasympathetic nervous system will increase saliva production, stimulate digestion, and decrease heart rate. I have included a diagram with some more examples to help you understand better some of the functions of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system and how they oppose each other. Due to these functions, the sympathetic nervous system is often described as our fight or flight responses and is associated with short-term survival and action preparation, while the parasympathetic nervous system is described as our rest and digest responses and is associated with long-term survival. To put simple, when faced with a threat, the sympathetic nervous system enters a state of stress response and revs up the body to help us either defend, so fight, or escape to safety, flight. Once the threat is gone, our parasympathetic system brings all the system of the body back to normal, allowing relaxation and healing. Emotions such as anxiety, fear, anger, distress are associated with the sympathetic nervous system, and emotions such as happiness, joy, serenity are associated with the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic and parasympathetic act much like yin and yang. They are complementary opposites, and when one is activated, the other one is suppressed. To continue, let's see some of the most known nervous system disorders, and then learn how yoga can help. Nervous system disorders can be divided into three groups: functional, such as epilepsy, dizziness, or neuralgia; degenerative, which cause gradual loss of function, such as Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, or Parkinson's disease; and even mental health problems, such as anxiety disorders, depression, or psychotic disorders like schizophrenia. The past years, there has been extended academic research on how yoga affects our nervous system, which has proved that yoga has multiple benefits. Physiological benefits: help stabilize autonomic nervous equilibrium with a tendency to parasympathetic nervous system dominance, which results to decreased heart rate, decreased blood pressure, increased cardiovascular efficiency, increased respiratory efficiency. It also increases musculoskeletal flexibility, range of motion, improves sleep quality, and normalizes endocrine and gastrointestinal function. Some psychological benefits are that it improves and stabilizes mood, it promotes self-acceptance, it helps face and deal with fear and trauma, decreases depression, decreases anxiety, and decreases hostility. Some psychomotor benefits are that it improves dexterity, balance, steadiness, coordination, and choice reaction time. And some cognitive function benefits are that it improves attention, concentration, memory, learning efficiency, and depth perception. There have also been a lot of researches about yoga's benefits on people with disorders like the ones mentioned before. Usually the research is in the form of experimenting with a group of patients that follow a yoga routine. It can include asana, pranayama, and or meditation, and a control group. And the duration is usually between 12 and 24 weeks. And many of the researchers concluded to very positive findings. In a study on the benefits of Sahaja Yoga on seizure control in patients with epilepsy, subjects reported a 62% decrease in seizure frequency at 3 months and a further decrease of 86% at 6 months of intervention. A second study where epilepsy patients practiced yoga meditation for 20 minutes twice per day had the following findings. After 3 months, patients reported more than 50% reduction of seizures. After 6 months, approximately 45% of the patients were seizure-free for 3 whole months. And after 12 months, 50% of the patients were seizure-free for exactly 6 whole months. These are some incredible results. In researches about patients with multiple sclerosis and Alzheimer's disease, the findings are also very positive, including management of symptoms, improvement of quality of life, improvement of memory, and reduction of depression. There has also been substantial research proving that conscious breathing and breathing exercises help calming the sympathetic nervous system, hence bringing a sense of relaxation to the practitioner. It is so widely accepted that breathing techniques are used by medical professionals in many different occasions for treating or relieving patients from certain symptoms. Now let's talk about yoga asanas. So what are the most beneficial yoga asanas for the nervous system? Well, actually this is a hard question to answer. Yoga focuses among others on prana, the vital life-sustaining energy, and how to harness it through breathing techniques, meditation, asana, and other practices such as bandhas, which are energy locks. Prana enters the body with the breath and flows into a network of subtle channels called nadis, reaching some of their major junctions, which are the chakras. Since practicing yoga asana requires the connection of mind, body, and breath, all asanas have benefits for the nervous system. Some are energizing, some are calming, some are grounding, and some other are relaxing. Some help us face our fears, some open our hearts, and some others release negative emotions, tension, or past trauma. Not only that, but even if we examine the relation of yoga to the nervous system just by anatomical terms, then we can say that any type of movement, from muscle contraction to breathing, happens due to the nervous system. Movement is a way of knowing ourselves, and practicing yoga asana teaches us about ourselves through movement. All the stretching, compression, and contraction of our tissues awaken the mind and body connection by stimulating the nervous system. For now, we will focus at the asanas that are mostly associated with decreasing anxiety and stress levels, relieving depression, and inducing a state of calmness and relaxation. Twisted asanas like Parivrita Trikonasana or Marichyasana balance the nervous system and help release irritation, tension, fear, and anxiety. Back bends like cat-cow flow, upward facing dog, Urdhva Mukha Svanasana, bow pose, Dhanurasana, wheel pose, Urdhva Dhanurasana or Chakrasana, camel pose, Ustrasana, and bridge pose, Setubada Sarvagasana. Although they are not calming asanas, they are especially beneficial for people suffering with depression. They help awaken the nervous system, open the heart, and help release fear. Inversions like supported headstand, Salamba Sirsasana, supported shoulder stand, Salamba Sarvagasana, feather peacock, Pincha Mayurasana, or plow pose, Halasana, is another group of asanas which is especially beneficial for depression and anxiety. By being inverted and thus bringing more energy to the heart, we feel joy and enthusiasm. These asanas, due to the fact that they are inverted, help us develop courage by getting over the fear of being upside down, and also help us change perspective. Furthermore, they need a lot of concentration, which stops anxiety and brings us to a quiet and centered state. Forward folds like Uttanasana, Prasarita Padottanasana, and Janusasana calm and restore the nervous system, while at the same time help us rest better. And restorative poses like Child's Pose Balasana, legs up the wall Viparita Karani, reclining bound ankle Supta Baddha Konasana, Happy Baby, Ananda Balasana, Reclined Hero, Supta Virasana, and of course, Corpse Pose, Savasana, bring our attention back to our breath, calming and relaxing the whole body. I have prepared a short yoga practice which includes pranayama, asana, and meditation, during which we will practice together most of the asanas mentioned here. Before we do that though, I would like to mention a few books for those of you who would like to have some additional reading. These are some suggestions for further reading for some of my favorite books that are related one way or another to the vast subject of the human nervous system and yoga benefits. There's an ocean of books out there, so feel free to search for more. I will also include a small passage from the description of each book so you can get an idea what it is about. First is Meditation by Oso, The First and Last Freedom. This book contains practical step-by-step guide to a wide variety of meditation techniques, from fire gazing to walking meditation, which deal with the special tensions of contemporary life. Recognizing that it's almost impossible for most people these days to stop and sit silently, these meditations begin with one or more stages of physical activity. This brings our physical and mental energies to a peak so that the following silence is easy, leaving us alert, refreshed, and newly energized. Well, this book shows that meditation is not necessarily a spiritual discipline separated from everyday life in the real world. And in my opinion, it's a very, very good tool for either people who are just beginning in meditation or for those that are looking for different techniques to try. The second book I would like to propose is one of my all-time favorites, which is The Road Less Traveled by Dr. Scott Peck. From the book, from the description, it says that confronting and solving problems is a painful process which most of us attempt to avoid, and avoiding results in greater pain and inability to grow both mentally and spiritually. Drawing heavily on his own professional experience, Dr. Scott Peck, a psychiatrist, suggests ways in which facing our difficulties and suffering through the changes can enable us to reach a higher level of self-understanding. Although this book is not directly connected to yoga, I am very confident that you will find a lot of yogic teachings inside. It's a really, really good book, and I highly recommend it to anybody, not only yogis. The third book that I would like to recommend is The Mindful Brain by Daniel Siegel, MD. So again, from the description of the book, it says that it's the first book to ever integrate neuroscience research with the ancient art of mindfulness. The result is a groundbreaking approach to not simple mental health, but life in general, and shows readers how personal awareness and attunement can actually stimulate emotional circuits in the brain, leading to a host of physiological benefits, including greater well-being, resilience, emotional balance, and improved cardiac and immune function. It's a very interesting book, highly recommend it. And last but not least, the fourth book is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, MD. This is a book that I picked up during my yoga teacher training, and I read it in conjunction to this project, and it really left me mind blown. I highly recommend it, especially to yoga teachers that really would like to work with students, not only in a physical level, but also in emotional and mental level. So again, from the book description, it says, renowned trauma expert Bessel van der Kolk has spent over 3 decades working with survivors. In this book, he transforms our understanding of traumatic stress, revealing how it literally rearranges the brain's wiring. Specifically, areas dedicated to pleasure, engagement, control, and trust, and he shows how these areas can be reactivated through innovative treatments including neurofeedback, mindfulness techniques, play, yoga, and other therapies. So that's all. That concludes today's presentation. The subject covered here, I believe, are really deep and vast, and we only scratch the surface, but I do hope that you learned something new and maybe you got intrigued and want to further investigate some of these subjects. So, closing the presentation, you will find all the sources that I used, including books, websites, universities, research studies, everything. So you can feel free to delve deeper. I want to thank you very much for joining. And I will be waiting for you in a couple of minutes to practice together yoga for our parasympathetic nervous system. Namaste.